It was one of those mornings that felt both promising and heavy at the same time. The sun was just coming up over the Atlanta skyline, painting soft gold across the airport windows. Inside, everything was moving fast. Rolling suitcases, long coffee lines, gate announcements echoing through the speakers. Among the crowd, a young black woman named Danielle Moore hurried through security, clutching her laptop bag and carry-on like her life depended on it. This day wasn't just another travel day for her. It was the day she'd been dreaming about for years. After months of late nights mixing natural oils and body scrubs in her small kitchen, she was finally getting a chance to pitch her handmade skincare brand to investors in New York. If the meeting went well, her products could soon appear in stores across the country. Every second mattered. Danielle was tired but excited. Her mind raced with the list of things she wanted to say in that meeting. How her products were inspired by her grandmother's old remedies. How she believed skincare wasn't just about beauty but self-respect. How she wanted women like her to feel seen and celebrated. She had practiced her pitch so many times she could recite it in her sleep. The line at security had been longer than she expected, and now the clock was chasing her. The loudspeaker called out, "Final boarding for Flight 213 to New York." Danielle's heart jumped. She had only 10 minutes left before the gate would close. She grabbed her bag from the scanner and started running, weaving through people, careful not to bump anyone. As she hurried toward gate C12, something caught her eye. A few feet ahead, near the row of seats by a coffee shop, an elderly man was struggling to lift his small suitcase onto a chair. He looked confused, almost lost. His glasses had fallen to the floor and he was bending slowly, trembling, trying to reach them. People passed by him, rushing travelers, business types with earbuds, families juggling kids. No one stopped. Everyone seemed too busy, too wrapped up in their own journeys. Danielle slowed down for just a second. Her mind screamed, "You can't stop now. If you miss this flight, you miss the meeting." But her heart whispered something else. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head, the way it always did when life tested her kindness. "Never walk past someone who needs help, baby. You never know when you might be in their place." She stopped running. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, gently walking over. The old man looked up, startled but relieved. His voice was soft and shaky. "Oh dear, thank you. My glasses. I can't seem to find them. I dropped them somewhere right here." Danielle crouched down and spotted the glasses just under the chair. She picked them up, wiped them carefully with a tissue from her purse, and handed them to him. "Here you go." "Oh, bless you," he said, slipping them back on. His eyes, now clearer, met hers with gratitude. "These old hands aren't what they used to be." "No worries," she said with a smile. "Do you need help with your bag too?" He nodded, embarrassed. "It's heavier than I remember. I was trying to sit and wait for my son, but I guess I'm not as strong as I used to be." Danielle lifted the small suitcase easily and placed it on the chair beside him. "There you go. You can sit down now." The man lowered himself slowly onto the seat, breathing a sigh of relief. "You're an angel," he said. "Everyone just walked past me. I thought maybe I'd turned invisible." Danielle smiled softly. "You're not invisible, sir. People are just in a hurry these days." He looked at her for a moment, studying her face as if he wanted to remember it. "Where are you headed, dear?" "New York," she said, checking her watch. "I have a flight right now, actually. Probably boarding as we speak." "Then go, don't let me keep you," he said quickly, guilt flashing in his eyes. She hesitated. The loudspeaker called again. "Final boarding call for Flight 213 to New York." Her heart sank. That was her flight. But the man looked uneasy. His breathing was shallow and his hands trembled as he tried to open a small bottle of water. She took it gently and twisted off the cap for him. "You should take a sip," she said. "You'll feel better." He smiled again, more relaxed now. "Thank you, young lady. You've got a kind soul. Not many like you left." Danielle didn't know what to say. She just nodded politely, grabbed her bag, and started to jog toward the gate again. When she reached gate C12, the boarding door had already closed. The gate agent stood behind the counter, typing on a computer. Danielle waved her ticket, breathing hard. "Please, can I still board?" "I was right here." The agent gave a sympathetic look but shook her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The flight just closed. Once the door's locked, we can't reopen it." Danielle's shoulders slumped. "Please, it's really important. I had an investor meeting this afternoon." "I understand," the woman said kindly. "But the next flight leaves in about 3 hours. I can put you on standby if you want. Danielle nodded slowly, her chest tight. Yeah, please do that. She walked away from the counter, feeling like her whole dream had slipped through her fingers. She sat down in a corner seat and stared out the window as the plane began to taxi away. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, a mix of frustration and quiet sadness. She closed her eyes and tried to calm herself. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe there was another way. Still, tears threatened to fall, not because she missed a plane, but because of everything behind it. The sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the hope she had carried all the way here. After a few minutes, she took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. She called the investor's assistant and explained the situation as calmly as she could. I missed my flight, she said, but I can take the next one and meet later today if that's possible. The assistant's tone was polite but distant. I'm sorry, the investor's schedule is tight today. They won't be available later. We can try to reschedule next month. Next month? Danielle repeated softly. That felt like forever. Yes, ma'am. I'll reach out when there's an opening. When the call ended, she stared at her phone for a long moment, then placed it face down on her lap. The world around her buzzed with travelers and announcements, but inside everything felt still. All that effort, gone in a few minutes. She leaned back in the seat, rubbed her eyes, and whispered to herself, You did the right thing, Danielle. You did what you were supposed to do. Her voice was soft, almost unsure, but deep down she believed it. Maybe missing the flight was part of something bigger, something she couldn't see yet. A few minutes later, she saw the same old man again. He was being guided by an airport staff member in a blue uniform, probably headed to his gate. He looked more relaxed now, his bag neatly beside him. When he noticed her, he gave a little wave and a smile that reached his eyes. She smiled back, though a small part of her heart still ached. She ordered a cup of coffee and found a quiet seat near a big window. As she sipped slowly, she began to notice the world around her again. A toddler laughing as his father chased him, a woman knitting quietly, a couple sharing snacks and jokes. The airport was full of stories like hers, people chasing something, missing something, helping someone, or starting over. Danielle opened her notebook and began writing ideas for her next product line. If she couldn't pitch today, she could still prepare for the next chance. Maybe this delay wasn't the end. Maybe it was a pause, a moment to breathe, to realign. Hours passed. The frustration faded into calm. She watched planes lift off into the sky, each one carrying someone closer to their dream. Her turn would come, she told herself. She just had to keep faith. As the loudspeaker announced boarding for the next flight to New York, she gathered her things, feeling a quiet determination return. Helping that old man had cost her something, but it had also reminded her of who she was. Not just a businesswoman chasing success, but a human being who believed in doing right, even when no one was watching. When she boarded the next flight, she took a seat by the window. As the plane lifted off, she looked down at the city shrinking beneath her and smiled faintly. Maybe the world worked in mysterious ways. Maybe kindness, like her grandmother used to say, always found a way back, even if it took the long route. She didn't know yet that the old man she'd helped was not just anyone. She didn't know that missing her flight would lead to something far greater than she had planned. For now, all she knew was that she'd done what felt right, and that was enough to keep her heart at peace. Danielle sat quietly on the plane as it began its steady climb through the clouds. The hum of the engines filled her ears, but her mind was somewhere else. She couldn't stop replaying what had happened earlier, the moment she saw the old man struggling, the way she chose to help him, and the sinking feeling that followed when she missed her flight. She had tried her best to push away the disappointment, but it still lingered. The meeting she was supposed to attend had already started hours ago, and she had no idea if she would ever get another chance. The flight attendants began moving through the aisle, offering drinks and snacks. Danielle smiled politely but declined. She wasn't hungry. Her thoughts were heavier than her stomach could handle. She opened her notebook again, flipping through pages filled with ideas, notes, and small drawings of product labels. Each page was a reminder of how hard she had worked for this dream, and how quickly things could slip away. When the plane landed in New York, it was already late afternoon. The city skyline glimmered under the sun, tall buildings shining like they were carved from glass. Danielle took a deep breath. She loved this city. She'd visited before, but this trip had been meant to be different, not for sightseeing, but for growth. Now it just felt like another missed opportunity. At baggage claim, she pulled her small suitcase from the carousel and walked toward the exit. The air outside was cool and sharp, filled with the noise of taxi horns and people in a rush. She opened her phone to check her messages. There was one from the investor's assistant, short and polite. "We understand about the delay. Please reach out next month to reschedule. Best wishes." Danielle read it twice and sighed. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying not to let frustration turn into hopelessness. She whispered softly, "Okay, next month it is." She could have gone straight to her hotel, but she decided to take a walk instead. Sometimes walking helped her think. She found a small cafe near the airport and ordered a cup of tea. The place was quiet, filled with the gentle sound of jazz music and the smell of baked bread. She sat by the window and pulled out her notebook again. This time, instead of writing business notes, she wrote down her thoughts. She wrote about the old man, about missing the flight, about how strange life could be, how a few minutes could change everything. After a while, her words began to shift from frustration to reflection. She wrote, "Maybe I wasn't meant to be at that meeting today. Maybe I was meant to help that man. Maybe life works in ways we can't understand until later." She stared at the words for a long moment, then smiled softly. Even though her heart still hurt, there was a small comfort in believing that her kindness had meaning. As the sun began to set, she finally made her way to her hotel. The lobby was warm and quiet, the kind of place where travelers rested after long journeys. She checked in, dropped her suitcase by the bed, and sank into a chair. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from her mother. Danielle answered quickly. "Hey, Mama." Her mother's familiar voice brought an instant calm. "Baby, did you make it safely?" "Yeah, I'm here," Danielle said. "But I missed the meeting." "Oh no," her mother said softly. "What happened?" Danielle explained everything, how she saw the old man, how she couldn't walk past him, and how that small act made her miss the flight. There was a moment of silence on the other end before her mother spoke. "You did the right thing, baby. God sees everything. You didn't lose anything by being kind. Sometimes blessings take the long way to reach us." Danielle smiled, even though her eyes stung a little. "I know, Mama, I just hope the long way isn't too long." Her mother laughed gently. "It'll come when it's supposed to. Just keep doing good and stay ready." They talked for a few more minutes, and when the call ended, Danielle felt lighter. Maybe her mother was right. She decided to make the most of her time in New York. She couldn't change what happened, but she could still use the trip to plan and recharge. The next morning, she woke up early and went for a walk around the city. The air smelled like coffee and fresh bagels. The streets were full of people. Artists setting up stands, office workers rushing by, street musicians tuning their instruments. New York had a heartbeat of its own. She found a bench in a small park and sat there watching people. A young man helped a woman lift her stroller down the stairs. Two strangers shared an umbrella. A taxi driver stopped to let an old lady cross the street even though the light had already turned green. Danielle smiled to herself. There was kindness everywhere if you looked close enough. It wasn't always big or loud. Sometimes it was just small moments like those. Later that day, she visited a few local beauty stores. She wanted to see what kinds of products were popular and maybe talk to a few shop owners. She introduced herself with confidence, explaining her brand and her ideas. A few people seemed genuinely interested and gave her their business cards. By the end of the day, her mood had shifted completely. She hadn't met the investors she came for, but she'd made connections she hadn't expected. Maybe this trip wasn't a loss after all. Maybe it was a redirection. That night, as she packed her things for the return flight, she looked out the hotel window at the glittering city lights. She thought again about the old man. She hoped he had made it to wherever he was going safely. She smiled at the thought of his gentle eyes and shaky hands. He reminded her of her grandfather, kind, wise, and quietly strong. The next morning, Danielle arrived at the airport early. She didn't want to risk missing another flight. She checked in, went through security, and sat by her gate with a cup of tea. The terminal was quieter this time. As she scrolled through her phone, she suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Well, fancy seeing you again." She looked up and couldn't believe her eyes. It was the same old man, the one she had helped 2 days ago. He was standing a few steps away, smiling warmly. He looked different now. Dressed neatly in a navy suit, his posture straighter, his face calm and cheerful. Danielle blinked in surprise. "Oh my goodness, hello. I didn't think I'd ever see you again." He chuckled. "Seems the world had other plans. You heading home now?" "Yes, finally," she said, laughing softly. "I missed my big meeting, but I guess things happen for a reason." The man nodded thoughtfully. "They surely do. Sometimes delays bring us where we're meant to be." She smiled, touched by his words. "You look much better today. Did you find your son?" He gave a little laugh. "Oh, yes, I did. And thank you again for helping me that day. You were the only one who stopped." "It was nothing," she said kindly. "I just couldn't walk past." "It wasn't nothing," he said seriously. "It meant a lot." They talked for a while, just small conversation about travel and work. He asked her what she did, and she told him about her skincare line, how she started it from her kitchen, how she was trying to grow it into something bigger. He listened carefully, nodding with genuine interest. "You sound like a hardworking young woman," he said. "What's the name of your brand?" She told him, and his eyes lit up. "That's a lovely name. You know, I've seen many businesses come and go, but the ones that last are the ones built with heart. I can tell you've got plenty of that." Danielle blushed a little. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." After a few minutes, a flight attendant approached the man and spoke quietly to him. He nodded and smiled, then turned back to Danielle. "Looks like it's time for me to board. It was truly a pleasure seeing you again." "Same here," she said, standing to shake his hand. "Safe travels," he smiled warmly. "You too, young lady. Keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more people like you." As he walked toward the gate, Danielle felt an odd sense of peace. There was something about the old man that stayed with her. Something she couldn't quite explain. She didn't know that this simple encounter was only the beginning of a bigger story. She didn't know that the man she helped would soon change her life in ways she never could have imagined. For now, she just sat back, sipping her tea, feeling grateful that even in moments of loss, kindness had found its way back to her. And as her flight began boarding, she whispered to herself, maybe Mama was right. Blessings really do take the long way home. The airport was calm that morning, sunlight streaming through the tall glass windows, casting soft shadows on the shiny floor. Danielle sat at the gate, sipping her tea and scrolling through her phone. It had been 2 long days since she missed her important meeting. And although the disappointment still lingered somewhere in her heart, she was slowly learning to let it go. She reminded herself that life wasn't always about speed. Sometimes it was about patience. She didn't know what the delay meant, but she trusted that one day it would make sense. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard a soft laugh nearby, a familiar voice that made her lift her head instantly. It was the old man again, the one she had helped at the airport a few days earlier. He looked even healthier now, standing tall, dressed in a simple gray suit with polished shoes and a kind smile. "Well, if it isn't my good Samaritan," he said warmly. Danielle couldn't help but smile. "I can't believe this. I was just thinking about you." He laughed gently. "And here I am in the same airport again. Seems like fate wants us to keep bumping into each other." She chuckled, shaking her head. "Maybe so. How are you feeling today?" "Much better, thank you," he said, lowering himself into the seat beside her. "My back's still a little stubborn, but I can't complain. And you? Did you get everything sorted out with your business meeting?" Danielle's smile faded slightly. "Not really. I missed the meeting completely. The investors couldn't reschedule, so I'll have to wait until next month." The man nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "I'm sorry to hear that. I imagine that must have been hard." "It was," she admitted, "but I'm trying to look at it differently. I guess helping you was more important at that moment." He smiled kindly. "You know, not many people would have stopped. Most would have just walked right by." "I couldn't," she said softly. "My grandmother used to tell me, do good and don't count the cost. I guess her words just stuck with me." "That's a wonderful way to live," he said with admiration. "Your grandmother must have been a wise woman." "She was," Danielle replied. "She taught me that success isn't just about money. It's about how you treat people along the way." The man nodded. "That's a truth many people forget." He paused for a moment, looking around as if lost in thought, then turned back to her. "Would you mind if I asked what your business is about?" "Not at all," she said, brightening up a little. "I started a small skincare company. Everything's handmade and natural. I use ingredients like shea butter and coconut oil, things my grandmother taught me about when I was younger. My goal is to make products that make people feel cared for, not just beautiful but confident. He listened carefully, his eyes never leaving hers. That sounds wonderful, he said sincerely. And how long have you been doing this? Almost 3 years now, she replied. It started small, just me making scrubs and creams at home, selling to friends and through social media. Then word started spreading. I've been saving and working hard to grow it, but I need investors to really take it to the next level. The old man nodded again, clearly impressed. You sound very determined. Danielle smiled shyly. I try to be. I just want to build something meaningful, something that lasts. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. Oh, who's that? She asked. My late wife, he said, his eyes softening. She had that same fire in her, always believed in kindness and hard work. She used to tell me that if you want to build something great, start by being a good person. Danielle smiled. Your wife sounds like she was amazing. She was, he said with a tender smile. And you, young lady, have that same light. I can see it. Danielle felt a warmth in her chest. His words touched her more than he probably knew. Thank you, she said quietly. The man leaned back, sighing contently. You know, it's funny how life works. We meet people at the strangest times, but sometimes those moments change everything. She nodded, thinking about that day, how she'd almost ignored him in her rush. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, she said. Maybe missing that flight wasn't a mistake. He smiled knowingly. Maybe it wasn't. Just then, the gate agent announced boarding for their flight. Danielle stood up and reached for her bag. Looks like it's time. The man stayed seated for a moment. You go ahead, he said with a small grin. I'll be right behind you. She smiled and joined the line of passengers. When she reached the boarding desk, the gate agent scanned her ticket and frowned for a moment. Miss Moore, the agent said. Yes? The woman's expression changed. You've been upgraded to first class. Danielle blinked in confusion. What, I didn't request that, the agent smiled. It's been taken care of. Enjoy your flight. Danielle looked down at her ticket, which now read first class. She was stunned. She glanced back toward the waiting area, where the old man was still sitting, speaking quietly to another staff member. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod and a smile. She mouthed, Did you do this? But he just winked playfully and turned back to his conversation. Danielle shook her head, smiling to herself as she walked onto the plane. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but it felt like something more. When she reached her seat, she couldn't believe how spacious and comfortable it was. A flight attendant greeted her warmly, offering her juice and a warm towel. She'd never flown first class before. It felt surreal. As the plane took off, she gazed out the window, thinking about everything that had happened in the past few days. Helping a stranger, missing her meeting him again. It all felt like a strange twist of fate. After about an hour, the flight attendant made an announcement that caught everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest on board today. We'd like to welcome the founder of our airline, Mr. Charles Whitman, who's traveling with us this morning. Danielle's heart skipped a beat. She turned toward the front of the cabin, and there he was, the same old man, smiling and waving politely as the passengers clapped. Her eyes widened in disbelief. He owns the airline? She thought, her mind spinning. For a moment, she just sat frozen, staring at him as realization washed over her. The kind, soft-spoken man she had helped at the airport wasn't just an ordinary traveler. He was the founder of one of the biggest airlines in the country. When the applause faded, he turned slightly and looked her way. Their eyes met, and he smiled that same gentle smile. It was a look that said, "Now you know." Danielle couldn't believe it. She leaned back in her seat, covering her mouth in shock, then started to laugh quietly to herself. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered under her breath. Throughout the flight, her mind buzzed with thoughts. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he been sitting alone struggling with his bag that day? Why would someone like him even be traveling without assistance or staff? But then she thought about his words, how he said life had strange ways of connecting people. Maybe he hadn't wanted anyone to treat him differently. Maybe he just wanted to see the world from the eyes of ordinary travelers again. After the flight landed, passengers began standing up to grab their bags. Danielle stayed seated, waiting for the aisle to clear. As she stood, She saw him waiting near the exit door, speaking quietly with one of the flight attendants. When he spotted her, he smiled again. "Miss Moore," he said warmly. "Hope you enjoyed the upgrade." She laughed nervously. "So that was you," he chuckled. "Guilty as charged. Why didn't you tell me who you were?" she asked, still amazed. "Because it didn't matter," he said gently. "You didn't help me because of who I was. You helped me because of who you are, and that's what really counts." Danielle was speechless. She felt both humbled and honored. He looked at her thoughtfully. "Do you have a few minutes after we land? I'd like to speak with you properly." "Of course," she said, nodding quickly. They walked together through the terminal, chatting casually as people passed by. He led her to a quiet area near a private lounge. When they stopped, he turned to her with a kind but serious expression. "You've got something special, Miss Moore," he said. "Not just your business idea, you. I see people all the time chasing success, but not many who carry goodness in their hearts while doing it." Danielle felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know," he smiled. "Let me tell you something. I built this airline from nothing but a dream and a borrowed loan. I've met hundreds of business owners, and I've learned one thing. Character matters more than anything else." She nodded, hanging on every word. "I want to help you," he said finally. "Let's set up a proper meeting. I'd like to hear more about your skincare company. I think we can do something together." For a second, Danielle couldn't breathe. "Wait, you mean really?" He laughed. "Of course. I don't make empty promises." Danielle's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to blink them away. "I don't know what to say. Just say yes," he said gently. She laughed through the tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." He smiled, reaching out to shake her hand. "Good. Then let's make something beautiful happen." As they stood there in the bright airport hallway, Danielle realized that missing that first flight hadn't been bad luck at all. It had been fate, perfectly timed, beautifully disguised. She had helped an old man without expecting anything in return, and now that small act of kindness was about to change everything. And as she left the airport that day, her heart was lighter than it had been in months. She didn't know exactly what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Sometimes the delay is the blessing. The morning sun shone softly through the tall glass windows of the city skyline. Danielle sat near the window of a quiet cafe downtown, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. She still couldn't believe what had happened the day before. Every time she thought about it, she shook her head and smiled in disbelief. The man she helped at the airport, the same man who seemed so frail and lost that morning, turned out to be one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. The founder of an entire airline. His name was Charles Whitman, and he had asked to meet her again today. She kept glancing at her watch, her heart racing with a mix of nerves and excitement. What could he possibly want? He said he wanted to help her, but Danielle still didn't know what that really meant. Was it just kind words, or was he serious about giving her an opportunity? She tried to calm herself. Whatever happened, she reminded herself, she hadn't done anything for a reward. She helped him because it was the right thing to do. Everything that came after that was just grace. Just as she was finishing her coffee, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Good morning, Miss Moore." Danielle turned and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Whitman." He stood there with that same kind smile, dressed in a simple navy coat, holding a folder in one hand. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting." "Not at all," she said. "Please sit down." He took a seat across from her, placing the folder on the table. "I trust you had a good night's rest after yesterday's surprise?" She laughed lightly. "I'm still processing it." "You gave me quite the shock," he chuckled. "I imagine so. I tend to keep a low profile when I travel. I like to see how people treat one another when they don't know who's watching." "That's an interesting way to travel," she said, smiling. He nodded. "You'd be surprised what you learn about people that way. But you, my dear, were something special. You didn't hesitate. You didn't look around to see if anyone else would step in. You just acted. That's rare." Danielle felt her cheeks warm. "I just did what anyone should do," he smiled knowingly. "That's what makes it even better, that you think it's normal. But I assure you it's not." He paused, then slid the folder toward her. "I've been thinking about your business. I asked one of my staff to do a little background check. Nothing invasive, I promise." just to learn more about what you're building. Danielle's eyes widened slightly. Oh, okay. I was impressed, he said simply. Your products are clean, creative, and have a real story behind them. That matters more than people realize. You're not just selling skincare, you're selling care itself. And I like that. Danielle felt a mix of pride and disbelief. Thank you, she said softly. That means a lot coming from you. He smiled. I'd like to help you take it to the next level. I've spoken with a few of my business partners, people who invest in up-and-coming entrepreneurs with potential. I'd like to connect you with them. Danielle blinked, unsure what to say. You mean real investors? For my company? Yes, he said calmly. Real investors. The kind who can help you grow faster than you ever imagined. But more importantly, people who believe in doing good business the right way. Danielle's heart felt like it skipped a beat. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said with a gentle laugh. You've worked hard. You deserve the chance. Tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. I've been trying for so long, she said, her voice trembling slightly. There were so many times I thought maybe it wasn't going to happen. And now, after missing my biggest chance, Mr. Whitman nodded slowly. Sometimes life has to close one door so we'll walk through the right one. You didn't lose your chance, Danielle. You just found a better one. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. She just sat there overwhelmed with gratitude. He gave her time to take it in, sipping his coffee quietly. Then he said, There's something else I'd like to offer. Our airline has a wellness program. We partner with small brands to provide comfort products for our passengers. I'd like to feature your skincare line in that program. We could start with travel-size versions, something soothing and natural for our customers. Danielle's eyes widened again. You're serious? Completely, he said. If you agree, I'll have my team contact you this week to go over the details. It's good for your brand and good for our passengers. Everyone wins. She couldn't stop smiling. It felt unreal, like a dream she didn't know she was allowed to have. I don't even know how to thank you, she said finally. Just keep being who you are, he said. That's thanks enough. They spent the next hour discussing ideas. He listened carefully as she talked about her ingredients, her story, her goals. He asked thoughtful questions, not as a powerful businessman, but as someone who truly cared about what she was building. When they finished, he said, You remind me of myself when I started this company. Back then, people told me I was crazy. I had no connections, no money, just a dream and a lot of hard work. But I believed in what I was doing. Danielle nodded, inspired. It's amazing how far that belief can take you. It is, he agreed. And now it's your turn. As they stood to leave, he reached out and shook her hand warmly. You've earned this, Danielle. Remember that. This isn't charity. This is opportunity meeting preparation. She smiled through happy tears. Thank you, Mr. Whitman. I won't waste it. I know you won't, he said kindly. And please, call me Charles. They shared a laugh before parting ways. That evening, Danielle sat by her hotel window staring out at the city lights. The world felt different now, bigger, brighter, full of possibility. She thought about everything that had happened in the last few days. One small act of kindness had turned into a chain of events she never could have planned. She whispered softly to herself, Grandma was right. Do good and don't count the cost. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Charles' team reached out just as he promised. Danielle signed a partnership deal with the airline's wellness program, and within months her products were featured on flights across the country. Passengers loved them. Natural hand creams, lip balms, and small jars of body butter that carried her grandmother's old recipes. Orders began pouring in. Her website traffic exploded. Magazines started calling to feature her story. But what touched her most wasn't the success. It was the messages she received from strangers who said her story inspired them. Women wrote to her saying they started their own small businesses after hearing how she turned kindness into opportunity. Some said they began helping others more, believing that goodness always comes back. And through it all, Charles stayed in touch. He became more than a business partner. He became a mentor and a friend. He guided her through business challenges, taught her how to manage growth, and reminded her to always stay grounded. One day, months later, she received an invitation to speak at a business conference. The theme was integrity and entrepreneurship. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't used to speaking in front of crowds. But Charles encouraged her. "You have a story the world needs to hear," he told her. And so she went. Standing on the stage that day looking out at hundreds of faces, Danielle felt her heart swell with gratitude. She told them about her journey, how she almost missed her chance because she stopped to help someone who needed her. "I didn't know who he was," she said, smiling at the audience. "I just saw a person who needed help. I thought missing my flight was the worst thing that could happen. But it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." The audience was silent, completely drawn in. She continued softly. "What I learned is that kindness doesn't always give instant rewards. Sometimes it makes you late. Sometimes it costs you something. But eventually it finds its way back, in ways you can't imagine." By the time she finished, people were on their feet, applauding. Some even had tears in their eyes. Later that evening, as she stood with Charles after the event, he smiled proudly. "You did beautifully, Danielle. Your grandmother would be proud." Danielle smiled back, her eyes glistening. "I think she would be." Charles nodded slowly. "You know, when I started my airline, I believed it was just about planes and passengers. But now I realize it's also about people. Real people with real stories." "You reminded me of that." Danielle laughed softly. "And you reminded me that miracles can hide in the most ordinary places, even in airport waiting areas." They both smiled, sharing a quiet understanding. As they left the conference hall that night, Danielle felt at peace. Life had come full circle. The woman who once ran through an airport desperate to catch her flight now walked confidently toward her future, knowing that sometimes the biggest blessings come disguised as delays. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that kindness had been the ticket that took her farther than any flight ever could. Months turned into a year, and Danielle's life looked completely different from the day she rushed through that airport, with a suitcase in hand and hope in her heart. What once felt like a missed opportunity had become the moment that changed everything. Her skincare brand had grown far beyond what she ever dreamed. The partnership with Charles's airline opened doors she never thought she could walk through. Passengers loved the small, travel-sized lotions and creams she created. They said it made them feel cared for. Some even wrote to her saying the scent reminded them of home or that it helped them relax during long flights. Danielle's products were now sold in boutiques, hotels, and airports across the country. She had a small but dedicated team working with her, and her once tiny studio had turned into a bright, busy workspace filled with the hum of creativity and purpose. But even with all the success, she stayed the same kind-hearted woman who helped a stranger when no one else would stop. She often told her team, "We don't just sell skincare, we sell kindness in a jar." One afternoon, she sat in her new office, surrounded by boxes of freshly printed labels. The sunlight poured in through the tall windows, and she smiled as she looked around. There were photos on the wall, one of her late grandmother, one of her small team celebrating their first major order, and one of her standing beside Charles, both smiling proudly. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Charles's assistant. "Mr. Whitman would like to invite you to the company's annual leadership gala next weekend." Formal attire, of course, Danielle smiled. She had attended the event the year before as a guest, but this time, she was invited as an honoree. Her story had touched so many people within the company that Charles insisted she be recognized. When the night of the gala arrived, Danielle stood before the mirror, adjusting her elegant navy blue dress. It wasn't overly fancy, just graceful, the kind her grandmother would have loved. She wore simple pearl earrings and a soft smile. When she arrived at the venue, she could hardly believe her eyes. The ballroom was filled with hundreds of people, executives, employees, guests from around the world. The chandeliers sparkled above them, and the sound of soft music floated through the air. Charles spotted her from across the room and waved warmly. He was standing with a group of executives looking as sharp and dignified as ever. When she approached, he greeted her with a proud smile. "There she is, the woman who taught us all a little something about kindness," he said, raising his glass slightly. She laughed modestly. "You give me too much credit." "Not nearly enough," he said. "Come, I have someone you should meet." He introduced her to a few key people, investors, business leaders, and even the airline's head of operations. Every person she met seemed to already know her story. They spoke about how inspiring it was, how it reminded them that humanity still existed in a fast-moving world. As the evening went on, the host of the gala took the stage. The lights dimmed slightly and the crowd quieted. Tonight, the host said, we celebrate not only business success but also the spirit of compassion that drives it. One of our special guests reminds us that integrity and empathy still matter. Please welcome Miss Danielle Moore. The audience erupted into applause. Danielle's heart pounded as she walked to the stage. She hadn't expected to speak, but Charles had told her earlier, just speak from your heart. That's always enough. She took a deep breath, looked out over the crowd, and began. A little over a year ago, she said softly, I was just a woman trying to make a dream come true. I had a small business, a suitcase full of samples, and a meeting that I thought could change my life. But that morning at the airport, I saw an older man struggling to carry his bag. People were walking past him, rushing to their gates. I almost did the same, but something told me to stop. The room was silent. I missed my flight that day. I thought I had lost everything I'd been working for. I sat in that airport feeling defeated, wondering why doing the right thing had cost me so much. But I didn't know that the man I helped was someone who could change my life in ways I couldn't imagine. She paused, smiling gently toward Charles in the crowd. That moment taught me something that no amount of success ever could. It taught me that kindness is never wasted. Sometimes it makes you late, sometimes it changes your plans, but it always finds its way back. And when it does, it reminds you that doing good is the greatest investment you can make. As she spoke, her voice trembled slightly, but it was strong. People leaned forward, completely captured by her words. I used to think success was about being in the right place at the right time. But now I know it's about being the right person, even when no one's watching. You never know who's crossing your path or how one small act can create a ripple that changes your whole story. When she finished, the entire room stood in applause. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Even the host seemed moved. Charles stood as well, clapping with a proud smile that said more than words ever could. After the speech, countless people came to congratulate her, some sharing their own stories of kindness. One young woman, barely in her 20s, said, I was about to give up on my small bakery business, but after hearing your story last year, I kept going. Now I'm expanding. Danielle hugged her warmly. That's what it's all about. Never giving up on yourself and never stopping being kind. Later that evening, as the music played and the guests mingled, Charles approached her again. You've come a long way, he said with a smile. I hope you're proud of yourself. I am, she said honestly. But I'm also grateful for you, for the people who believed in me, for that strange morning at the airport. He chuckled. Life has a funny way of teaching us lessons at the most inconvenient times. She laughed softly. You can say that again? He became thoughtful for a moment. You know, Danielle, people spend years chasing success and recognition. But in the end, it's the moments of heart that matter. You reminded me of that. You reminded everyone of that, she smiled. And you reminded me that some people still lead with compassion, even when they have power. He nodded. Maybe that's why we crossed paths, to remind each other. The two of them stood quietly for a while, watching the crowd, the laughter, and the music. The air felt full of warmth and meaning. Later that night, as Danielle left the gala, she stepped out into the cool evening air. The city lights twinkled above her, and a soft breeze brushed her face. She looked up at the night sky, feeling a deep sense of peace. Her phone buzzed again. It was a notification. Someone had tagged her in a video from the gala. She opened it and saw herself on stage, speaking about kindness. The caption read, This woman missed her flight, went and found her destiny. She smiled quietly, tears filling her eyes. The next morning, she woke up early, sat by the window with her cup of tea, and wrote in her journal, something she did every morning. One act of kindness changed my life. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't come wrapped in a bow. It came disguised as a delay, as disappointment, as something I didn't understand at first. But now I know, kindness never makes you lose. It just makes you ready for something bigger. She closed her journal and looked around her office, filled with the scent of essential oils and new beginnings. Her team would be arriving soon, and there was work to do. But before she got up, she whispered softly to herself, Grandma was right all along. Do good, and the world will find its way back to you. A year later, Danielle launched a foundation in partnership with Charles's company. Its purpose was to support small women-owned businesses, especially those started by women of color. They provided grants, mentorship, and opportunities, just like the one she had received. During the launch event, She stood before a group of young women who reminded her of herself, full of dreams, fears, and determination. She told them, "You might think the world doesn't see your effort, but it does. Every act of kindness, every moment you choose integrity over shortcuts, it all adds up. It builds your character, and one day it will open the right doors." As the women cheered and hugged her afterward, she realized something important. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed that goodness still had power. And in that moment, she understood what Charles had meant the very first day they met after the airport. Sometimes, life has to make you miss a flight so you can catch your purpose. That day, Danielle didn't just find success, she found her calling. And as her company grew, as her story spread across hearts and homes, she became a living reminder of one simple truth. Kindness might delay your plans, but it never denies your destiny.